The rain came down like bullets against the wooden platform of Fort Kearny's train station, and Eleanor Hayes stood there alone with her two battered suitcases, watching the carriage that had brought her disappear into the storm-darkened afternoon. Her in-laws had deposited her there without a word of farewell, their faces hard as flint through the carriage window, as they turned away from the woman their son had married just 3 months before he died in a ranching accident outside Omaha. Eleanor's hands trembled as she gripped the handles of her cases, her thin wool coat already soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her face. The year was 1876, and she had nowhere to go. The platform offered little shelter from the driving rain, and the ticket master had already closed up his booth for the day. Eleanor looked up and down the muddy street of Fort Kearny, Nebraska, searching for anything that might offer refuge. The town was small, just a cluster of buildings that had grown up around the old military fort, and in the storm it looked desolate and unwelcoming. She had no money for a hotel room even if she could find one. Her in-laws had made it clear that morning that they wanted nothing more to do with her, that she was no longer their responsibility now that their son was buried. They had agreed to take her as far as the train station, and that was the extent of their charity. Eleanor sank onto a wet bench, her skirts heavy with rainwater, and tried to think. She had no family of her own, her parents having died of fever when she was 16. That was how she had ended up working as a seamstress in Omaha, how she had met Thomas Hayes at a church social. He had seemed kind, and his family had seemed respectable. The marriage had been brief and not particularly happy, though Thomas had never been cruel. But then came the accident with the spooked horses, and suddenly, Eleanor found herself a widow before she had truly learned how to be a wife. The wind picked up, sending sheets of rain across the platform, and Eleanor shivered violently. She needed to find shelter soon or she would catch her death. She stood, lifting her heavy cases, and stepped off the platform onto the muddy street. Her boots sank into the mire immediately, and she struggled to keep her balance as she made her way toward what looked like a general store across the way. Before she could reach it, a horse and rider appeared through the curtain of rain, moving at a steady pace despite the weather. The man sat tall in the saddle, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face, his oilskin coat shedding water. He pulled up his horse when he saw Eleanor struggling in the mud, and in one smooth motion he dismounted. "Madam," he said, and his voice was deep and steady. "You should not be out in this weather." Eleanor looked up at him, water streaming into her eyes. She could barely make out his features beneath the hat, but she saw a strong jaw and concerned eyes. "I do not have much choice," she said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "I was left here." The man glanced toward the train station, then back at Eleanor. His eyes took in her soaked clothing, her heavy cases, the way she swayed slightly on her feet. "Left here? By whom?" "My in-laws," Eleanor said, and she hated how small her voice sounded. "They brought me from Omaha. They said they could not afford to keep me any longer." The man's jaw tightened. "In the middle of a storm? What kind of people would do such a thing?" Eleanor did not answer. She was not sure she could speak without breaking down entirely, and she had already lost too much dignity this day. She tried to lift her cases again, but her hands were numb with cold and one slipped from her grasp, falling into the mud with a wet thud. The man bent and retrieved the case without hesitation. "Come on," he said, picking up both cases as though they weighed nothing. "I will take you home. You can get warm and dry, and then we will figure out what to do." Eleanor stared at him. "I cannot possibly impose on you like that. I do not even know your name." "Owen Osborne," the man said. "I have a ranch about 5 miles west of town. It is not much, but it is warm and dry, and my housekeeper will see that you are properly looked after. You will freeze if you stay out here much longer." Eleanor knew he was right, but every instinct told her that accepting help from a strange man was dangerous. Still, what choice did she have? She had no money, no prospects, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. If she refused his help, she might very well die of exposure before morning. "Eleanor Hayes," she said finally, "and I thank you for your kindness." Owen nodded and tied her cases to his saddle, then turned to her. "You will have to ride with me. Can you manage that?" Eleanor had ridden only a few times in her life, always on gentle horses at walking pace, but she nodded. Owen swung into the saddle with an easy grace that spoke of years of practice, then reached down for her. Eleanor took his hand, surprised by the strength in his grip as he pulled her up behind him. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from falling, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. "Hold on tight," Owen said, and then they were moving through the storm. The ride seemed to take forever. Eleanor clung to Owen's back, her face pressed against his oilskin coat, feeling the powerful muscles of the horse beneath her. The rain was relentless, and the wind tried to tear her from the saddle, but Owen rode with absolute confidence, never faltering even when the trail became nearly invisible in the downpour. Eleanor found herself trusting him despite having just met him, something about the solid strength of him reassuring. When they finally reached the ranch, Eleanor could barely make out the buildings through the rain. Owen rode straight to the barn, dismounting quickly and then reaching up to help Eleanor down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet touched the ground, but Owen caught her, steadying her with his hands on her arms. "Let me get you inside," he said, and there was genuine concern in his voice. He grabbed her cases and led her through the rain to a modest house made of sturdy timber. The door opened before they reached it, and a woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and a practical manner appeared in the doorway. "Owen Osborne, what have you brought home in this weather?" she demanded. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Eleanor Hayes. I found her abandoned at the train station. She needs to get warm and dry immediately." Mrs. Peterson's expression shifted from surprise to indignation to maternal concern in the space of a heartbeat. "Abandoned in this storm? Come in, child, come in at once." "Owen, you see to the horse. I will take care of Mrs. Hayes." Eleanor found herself swept into the warm interior of the house, hustled down a hallway and into a small bedroom. Mrs. Peterson moved with brisk efficiency, building up the fire in the small stove, pulling out quilts and blankets, finding a nightgown and a thick robe. "You get out of those wet things immediately," Mrs. Peterson ordered. "I will bring hot water for washing and then some soup. You look half frozen to death." Eleanor's fingers fumbled with the buttons of her dress, but eventually she managed to strip off the sodden layers. The nightgown Mrs. Peterson had provided was made of thick flannel and felt like heaven against her chilled skin. She wrapped herself in the robe and sat on the edge of the bed, still shivering. Mrs. Peterson returned with a basin of hot water, clean cloths, and a steaming bowl of soup. "There now," she said, her voice gentling. "You wash up and eat this, and then you are going straight to bed. We can talk about everything else in the morning." "I do not want to be a burden," Eleanor said, but her voice was weak. "Nonsense. Any decent person would do the same. Now eat that soup before it gets cold." Eleanor obeyed, and the hot liquid seemed to bring feeling back to her frozen limbs. When the bowl was empty, Mrs. Peterson took it away and helped Eleanor into the bed, piling quilts over her until she could barely move beneath their weight. "Sleep now," Mrs. Peterson said. "You are safe here." Eleanor wanted to argue, to explain, to plan, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes closed almost against her will, and she sank into the warmth and softness of the bed, falling into a deep sleep almost instantly. When she woke, pale morning light was filtering through the curtains. The storm had passed, and through the window Eleanor could see blue sky and the shapes of buildings in the yard. She lay still for a moment, trying to orient herself, remembering in pieces the nightmare of the previous day. A soft knock came at the door. "Mrs. Hayes, are you awake?" "Yes," Eleanor called, sitting up. Mrs. Peterson entered with a tray bearing breakfast and a pot of tea. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Much better, thank you. I am deeply grateful for your kindness." "It is Owen you should thank. He is the one who brought you here." Mrs. Peterson set the tray on a small table by the window. "I have pressed one of your dresses and laid out fresh undergarments. Take your time getting ready and then come to the kitchen. Owen would like to speak with you." Eleanor's stomach tightened with anxiety, but she nodded. After Mrs. Peterson left, she ate the breakfast, finding herself ravenously hungry, and then dressed in the clothes that had been laid out. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a pale, thin woman with dark circles under green eyes. She pinned up her brown hair as neatly as she could and then made her way through the house to the kitchen. Owen Osborne stood by the window, looking out at his land, and in the daylight, Eleanor got her first clear look at him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. When he turned at her entrance, she saw that he had gray eyes, a straight nose, and a mouth that looked like it might smile easily under better circumstances. He was perhaps 30 years old, and there was something solid and dependable about him. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, inclining his head, "I hope you slept well." "I did, thank you. And please call me Eleanor. I feel I owe you my life, Mr. Osborne." Formal address seems unnecessary given the circumstances. "Owen, then," he said. He gestured to the table. "Please sit. We should talk about what happens next." Eleanor sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Owen took the seat across from her, and Mrs. Peterson brought fresh coffee before discreetly disappearing into another part of the house. "Tell me what happened," Owen said quietly, "if you are comfortable doing so." Eleanor took a breath and told him the whole story. Her parents' deaths, her work as a seamstress, her brief marriage to Thomas Hayes, his death, and the cold rejection of his family. Owen listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she spoke. "They had no right to abandon you that way," he said when she finished. "No matter their financial situation. They did not want the responsibility of me," Eleanor said simply. "And legally, I suppose they did not have to take it. I am not their blood. That does not make it right." Owen ran a hand through his hair, clearly troubled. "What were you planning to do?" "Where were you going to go?" "I do not know," Eleanor admitted. "I have some skill with a needle. I had hoped to find work somewhere, perhaps in a larger town. But I have no money for train fare, and I know no one who might help me." Owen was quiet for a long moment, and Eleanor could see him thinking. Finally, he said, "I have a proposition for you if you will hear it." Eleanor's heart began to beat faster. "I am listening." "I need someone to help manage this household. Mrs. Peterson does her best, but she is getting on in years and the work is becoming too much for her. She has been asking me to hire help for months now. You need a place to stay and a way to earn your keep. It seems like we might be able to help each other." Eleanor stared at him. "You would hire me?" "Just like that? You know nothing about me. I know you have been dealt an unfair hand by life, and I know you need help. That is enough for now." Owen leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I can offer you room and board plus a small wage. Nothing grand, but enough that you could save up some money if you needed to move on eventually. Mrs. Peterson would teach you what you need to know, and you would have your own space and your privacy. It would be respectable." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Owen said simply. "And because I know what it is like to need help and have nowhere to turn. When I was 18, I left home with nothing but the clothes on my back. People helped me along the way, people who had no reason to do so except common decency. I suppose I am paying that forward." Eleanor wiped at her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will think about it at least. Stay here a few days, help Mrs. Peterson with the household tasks, see if it suits you. If it does not, I will take you into town and help you find another situation. But I think this could work, Eleanor. I really do." Eleanor looked at this man who had appeared out of the storm like some kind of guardian angel, who was offering her a lifeline when she had been completely lost. She hardly dared to hope, but what choice did she have? "I will try it," she said. "And thank you, Owen. I do not think I can ever properly express my gratitude." "No gratitude necessary," Owen said, and this time he did smile, transforming his serious face into something warm and kind. "Welcome to the Osborne Ranch, Eleanor." The days that followed fell into a comfortable routine. Eleanor worked alongside Mrs. Peterson, learning the rhythms of the household. She cooked and cleaned, mended clothes and helped with the laundry, tended the kitchen garden and fed the chickens. The work was hard but satisfying, and she found herself sleeping deeply each night, her body tired in a good way. Owen was often out working the ranch with his 3 hired hands, managing the cattle and horses, repairing fences and buildings, doing the 1,000 tasks that kept a ranch running. But he came in for meals, and Eleanor found herself looking forward to those times. Owen was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor and a thoughtful way of listening. He asked about her life before, about her dreams and hopes, and he shared stories of his own past, of the years he had spent drifting before finally earning enough to buy this land. "I wanted something that was mine," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the prairie. "Something I built with my own hands, something no one could take away from me. This ranch is not much yet, but it is growing. Another few years and I will have a real operation here." "You have done well for yourself," Eleanor said. "You should be proud." "I am," Owen said, "but it can be lonely sometimes. This is a lot of land for one man to rattle around in." Eleanor glanced at him, wondering at the loneliness in his voice. She had assumed a man like Owen would have a wife, perhaps children, but he lived alone with just Mrs. Peterson and the ranch hands who stayed in the bunkhouse. "Have you never wanted to marry?" she asked, then immediately regretted the forward question. "Forgive me, that is too personal." "No, it is all right," Owen said. "I suppose I never met the right woman, and I have been busy building this place. But yes, I have thought about it. A man wants a family, wants someone to share his life with." He looked at her then, something in his eyes that made Eleanor's breath catch. "What about you? Did you love your husband?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I cared for Thomas. He was kind to me in his way. But we barely knew each other when we married, and we had so little time together afterward. I do not think I really knew what love was supposed to feel like. And now I am just grateful to be here, to have work and a roof over my head. Love seems like a luxury I cannot afford to think about." Owen nodded slowly. "Maybe, or maybe it is the one thing we cannot afford to live without." The conversation shifted to easier topics after that, but Eleanor found her mind returning to Owen's words as she lay in bed that night. She was starting to realize that her feelings for Owen were becoming complicated. She admired him, certainly. She was grateful to him. But there was something more, something that made her heart beat faster when he entered a room, something that made her hyper-aware of his presence when they worked side by side. She told herself it was foolish. She had only been at the ranch for 3 weeks. She was still technically in mourning for her late husband, though she had barely known him. And Owen was her employer, not a potential suitor. She needed to keep her feelings in check, to maintain the professional distance appropriate to their relationship. But it was hard, especially as the weeks turned into months and spring gave way to early summer. Owen made it hard without meaning to, with his quiet kindness and his steady presence, with the way he looked at her, sometimes like she was something precious. Mrs. Peterson noticed, of course. The housekeeper had sharp eyes and little escaped her notice. "That man is falling for you," she told Eleanor one afternoon as they worked in the kitchen together, making preserves from the early strawberries. "And unless I am very much mistaken, you are falling for him too." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I do not know what you mean." "Oh, do not play coy with me, child. I have eyes in my head. The way you two look at each other, the way you find excuses to be in the same room, it is as clear as day." "Even if that were true, it would be inappropriate," Eleanor said firmly. "I am an employee here, and I am recently widowed. You are a woman who was married for 3 months to a man you barely knew and who died half a year ago. There is no shame in moving on with your life, especially when a good man is offering you the chance at real happiness." "Has Owen said something to you?" Eleanor asked, her heart racing. "He does not have to. But for what it is worth, yes, he has asked my opinion on whether he ought to speak to you about his feelings. I told him to wait a bit longer to give you time to settle in and be sure of your own heart. But Eleanor, that man is in love with you. And I think you would be a fool to let pride or propriety stand in the way of something real." Eleanor turned away, ostensibly to stir the pot on the stove, but really to hide the tears that had sprung to her eyes. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Of what, child? Of caring too much? Of losing someone again? Of being hurt?" Eleanor wiped at her eyes. "Everything I have ever loved has been taken from me. My parents, my brief marriage, my home. What if I let myself love Owen and something happens? I do not think I could bear it, Mrs." Peterson came and put a gentle hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "Life does not come with guarantees, my dear. Bad things happen to good people all the time, and there is nothing we can do to stop it. But that does not mean we should refuse to live, refuse to love. Owen is a good man, one of the best I have ever known. He would do everything in his power to make you happy. Is that not worth the risk?" Eleanor did not answer, but she thought about Mrs. Peterson's words for days afterward. She watched Owen as he worked, as he interacted with his ranch hands and the neighbors who sometimes stopped by. He was patient and fair, hardworking and honest. He had a rare combination of strength and gentleness that drew people to him. And when he looked at Eleanor, there was something in his eyes that made her feel seen and valued in a way she had never experienced before. It was early July when things finally came to a head. Owen had ridden into town for supplies, and when he returned in the late afternoon, he was clearly troubled about something. He went through dinner distracted, barely eating, and when Eleanor and Mrs. Peterson tried to draw him into conversation, his responses were short and preoccupied. After the meal, Mrs. Peterson announced she was going to visit her sister in town and would stay the night, giving Eleanor a significant look as she left. Eleanor found herself alone in the house with Owen, acutely aware of every sound, every movement. She was washing the dishes when Owen came into the kitchen. She could feel his presence behind her, could sense his tension. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Eleanor dried her hands on her apron and turned to face him. "What is wrong? You have been upset all evening." Owen ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had learned meant he was agitated. "I was in town today at the Mercantile. Your in-laws were there." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. "The Hayes family, here in Fort Kearny. Apparently they are passing through on their way to Colorado. They were asking about you, asking if anyone had seen a woman matching your description." Owen's jaw tightened. They seemed very interested in knowing your whereabouts. But why? They made it clear they wanted nothing to do with me. I do not know, but I do not trust their motivations. I did not tell them you were here, and I do not think anyone else in town knows where you ended up. But Eleanor, I am worried. What if they come here? What if they try to take you back? Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm summer evening. They cannot make me go with them. I am an adult, not a child. Legally, that may be true, but we both know how these things work. If they make a big enough fuss, claim you owe them money or that you are mentally unfit or any number of other lies, they could cause trouble. Real trouble. Owen stepped closer and Eleanor could see the concern etched on his face. I will not let them hurt you, Eleanor. I promise you that, but I think we need to make sure you are protected. How? Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Owen took a deep breath. Marry me. Eleanor stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? Marry me? Owen repeated, his gray eyes locked on hers. If you are my wife, they will have no claim on you at all. You will be legally and socially untouchable. And more than that, Eleanor, I want you to marry me. Not just to protect you, though that is part of it. I want you to marry me because I have fallen in love with you. Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Owen, I do not know what to say. Say you feel something for me too. Say you might learn to love me if you do not already. Say you will give us a chance. Owen reached out and took her hands in his grip warm and strong. I know this is sudden. I know you probably think I am crazy, but Eleanor, these past months with you here have been the happiest of my life. When I wake up in the morning, I look forward to seeing your face at breakfast. When I am out working, I find myself hurrying through tasks so I can come back to the house sooner. You make this place feel like a home instead of just a ranch. You make me feel like I am more than just a man working himself into the ground. You make me feel alive. Tears were streaming down Eleanor's face now. I am afraid, she whispered. Of what? Of all of it. Of feeling too much, of losing you, of not being enough. Owen pulled her closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. You are more than enough, Eleanor. You are everything. And yes, life is uncertain. Bad things happen that we cannot control. But I would rather have one day of real happiness with you than a lifetime of playing it safe and being alone. I love you. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you standing in that storm, trying so hard to be brave even though you were terrified. Eleanor looked up into his face, seeing nothing but honesty and tenderness there. She thought about the past months, about the peace she had found here, about the way Owen made her feel safe and valued and seen. She thought about the loneliness she had felt before, the sense of drifting through life without an anchor. And she realized that Mrs. Peterson had been right. Love was a risk, but it was a risk worth taking. I love you too, she said, and the words felt like freedom. I have been trying to be sensible and practical, but I cannot help it. I love you, Owen. Owen's face transformed with joy, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and gentle on hers. Eleanor melted into him, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, and for a moment the rest of the world fell away. There was only Owen, only the two of them, only this perfect moment of connection and love. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and Owen rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes then? You will marry me? Yes, Eleanor said, laughing through her tears. Yes, I will marry you. They were married 3 days later in the small church in Fort Kearney, with Mrs. Peterson and the ranch hands as witnesses. Eleanor wore a simple dress of pale blue that Mrs. Peterson had helped her make from fabric Owen purchased in town. Owen wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his face alight with happiness. The ceremony was brief, conducted by an elderly minister who had seen countless couples through the same vows, but to Eleanor it felt profound and sacred. When Owen slipped a simple gold band on her finger and kissed her as his wife, she felt like her life was finally beginning. They held a small celebration back at the ranch, with food and music and dancing. The ranch hands were clearly delighted, having been rooting for the match for weeks. Mrs. Peterson cried happy tears and hugged Eleanor fiercely. "You are going to be so happy, child," she whispered. "Owen will make sure of it." As the sun set and the guests began to drift away, Owen took Eleanor's hand and led her away from the house, out to a small rise that overlooked the ranch. They stood together in the gathering dusk, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "This is all ours now," Owen said quietly. "Yours and mine together. I want to build a good life here with you, Eleanor. I want to fill this house with children and laughter. I want to grow old watching the sun set over this land with you by my side." "I want that too," Eleanor said, turning to look up at him. "I never thought I could be this happy. After everything that happened, I thought I was destined to always be alone, always on the outside looking in. But you changed everything." "We changed everything," Owen corrected gently. "You took a chance on me too, remember? You could have refused my proposal, could have decided to make your own way in the world, but you chose to stay, chose to build a life with me. That took courage." Eleanor thought about that night at the train station, about how lost and afraid she had been. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, though it had been less than 6 months. So much had changed. She had changed. She was no longer the frightened, abandoned woman with nowhere to go. She was Owen Osborne's wife, a rancher's wife, a woman with a home and a future. "I love you," she said again, because the words felt important, felt necessary. "I love you too," Owen replied, and then he kissed her again as the stars began to appear overhead. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous and eager in equal measure. Owen was gentle with Eleanor, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed that was now theirs, talking quietly until sleep overtook them. The next few weeks were blissful. Eleanor had thought she was happy before, but being Owen's wife was something entirely different. There was an intimacy between them now, a sense of partnership and belonging that went beyond the attraction and affection they had felt before. They worked together during the day, Owen often finding reasons to come back to the house to steal a kiss or share a cup of coffee. At night, they retreated to their bedroom, learning each other's bodies, talking about their dreams and plans, building the foundation of a marriage that would last a lifetime. It was nearly a month after the wedding when the Hayes family finally appeared at the ranch. Eleanor was in the kitchen making bread when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. She looked out the window and felt her stomach drop when she recognized Thomas's father and mother in the driver's seat, along with Thomas's older brother Samuel. Owen was out in the north pasture, too far away to be easily reached. Mrs. Peterson had gone into town. Eleanor was alone, and for a moment the old fear threatened to overwhelm her. But then she squared her shoulders and reminded herself that she was not the same helpless woman they had abandoned. She was Eleanor Osborne now, and she had every right to be here. She went out onto the porch as the wagon pulled into the yard. Mr. Hayes climbed down first, his face hard and unwelcoming. Mrs. Hayes stayed in the wagon, her mouth set in a thin line. Samuel climbed down and stood beside his father, his arms crossed over his chest. "Eleanor," Mr. Hayes said coldly, "we have been looking for you." "Have you?" Eleanor kept her voice level, refusing to show weakness. "That is odd, considering you left me at a train station in a storm." "We have come to take you back to Omaha," Mr. Hayes said, ignoring her words. You cannot stay here, living in sin with some rancher." "I am not living in sin," Eleanor said firmly. "Owen Osborne and I are married. We were wed nearly a month ago in the church in Fort Kearney. I am his legal wife, and I have no intention of going anywhere with you." Mr. Hayes's face darkened. "You cannot be married. You did not have our permission." "I did not need your permission. I am a widow, not a child. I have every right to remarry." "You owe us money," Samuel interjected. "We paid for your passage from Omaha, paid for your keep for months after Thomas died. You cannot just run off without repaying your debts." Eleanor felt anger rising in her chest. "You threw me away like garbage. You left me in a storm with no money and no way to care for myself. If anyone has a debt to settle, it is you who owe me." "Why, you ungrateful little wretch!" Mr. Hayes started forward, his hand raised as though to strike her. "I would not do that if I were you." The voice came from behind Eleanor, and she turned to see Owen striding across the yard, his face like thunder. He must have seen the wagon and come riding back at full speed. He moved to stand beside Eleanor, his presence solid and protective. "Who are you?" Mr. Hayes demanded. "Owen Osborne, Eleanor's husband, and I am telling you right now that you need to leave my property." "We have business with Eleanor," Mr. Hayes said. "She owes us money." "She owes you nothing," Owen said flatly. "You abandoned her when she needed help most. You left her in a storm with no resources and no support. As far as I am concerned, any debt she might have owed you was paid in full by your cruelty." "Now you listen here," Samuel started, but Owen cut him off. "No, you listen. Eleanor is my wife. She is under my protection. You have no legal claim on her, no moral authority over her, and no right to be on my land. I am giving you one chance to turn that wagon around and leave peacefully. If you refuse, I will have the sheriff out here, and we can discuss your actions in front of a judge. I am quite certain that abandoning a penniless woman in a storm is frowned upon by the law, even if it is not technically illegal." Mr. Hayes's face was red with anger, but he could see he was beaten. Owen was bigger, younger, and clearly prepared to back up his words with action if necessary. And the mention of the sheriff had struck home. The last thing the Hayes family needed was legal scrutiny of their actions. "This is not over," Mr. Hayes said, but it sounded like an empty threat. "Yes, it is," Eleanor said quietly. "It has been over since the moment you left me at that train station. I am not your responsibility anymore, and you are not mine. Go back to Omaha and forget you ever knew me, because I intend to do the same with you." Mrs. Hayes finally spoke from the wagon, her voice bitter. "You always thought you were too good for this family. I am glad Thomas is not alive to see what you have become." Eleanor felt the words like a slap, but Owen's hand found hers and squeezed gently, lending her strength. "I think Thomas would be happy to see me safe and loved," she said. "Which is more than he would say about any of you. Now please leave. You are not welcome here." The Hayes family climbed back into their wagon, Mr. Hayes snapping the reins with more force than necessary. They drove away without another word, disappearing down the dusty road toward town. Eleanor stood watching until they were out of sight, and then she began to shake. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "They are gone," he murmured into her hair. "They cannot hurt you anymore." "I was so afraid," Eleanor whispered. "When I saw them, I was afraid they would find a way to take me back, to make me leave with them. That was never going to happen. I would not have let them. You are my wife, Eleanor, and I will always protect you. Always." Eleanor clung to him, letting herself feel the fear and then letting it go. Owen was right. The Hayes family had no power over her anymore. She was free of them, free to build the life she wanted with the man she loved. That night, as they lay in bed together, Eleanor told Owen about her brief marriage to Thomas, about the loneliness and uncertainty of those months. She had not talked about it much before, but now it felt important to share, to let Owen see all of her, even the painful parts. Owen listened without judgment, his hand stroking her hair, and when she finished, he simply held her close. "You have been through so much," he said quietly. "But you are stronger than you know, Eleanor. You survived all of it, and now you are here with me. That takes incredible resilience." "I did not feel strong," Eleanor said. "I felt lost and afraid most of the time. Being afraid does not mean you are not strong, it just means you are human." Owen kissed her forehead. "And you do not have to be afraid anymore. We have each other now, and we are building something good here. Something that is ours." As summer deepened and turned toward fall, Eleanor found herself settling into her new life with a contentment she had never known before. The ranch thrived under Owen's careful management, and Eleanor took pride in her role as his partner. She managed the household with Mrs. Peterson's help, kept the books for the ranch accounts, and even learned to ride so she could accompany Owen on his rounds of the property. In September, Eleanor realized she was with child. She told Owen one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. For a moment he simply stared at her, and then a grin spread across his face so wide it looked like it might split. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Eleanor said, laughing at his expression. "In the spring, if my calculations are correct." Owen let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. Then he set her down carefully, as though she were made of glass, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting?" "Owen, I am fine. I am pregnant, not ill. I can still do everything I normally do." "But you should not overdo it. You should let Mrs. Peterson do the heavy work. You should rest more. You should eat more. Do you need me to bring you something? Water, food, more pillows?" Eleanor laughed and pulled him down to sit beside her. "I need you to stop fussing. I am perfectly healthy and the baby is fine. We have months to prepare, and I promise I will take care of myself." But Owen continued to fuss, and Eleanor found it both exasperating and endearing. He brought her breakfast in bed, insisted she take afternoon naps, and worried constantly about her health. Mrs. Peterson found it hilarious and told Eleanor to enjoy being pampered while it lasted. As fall gave way to winter, Eleanor's belly began to swell with the growing baby. She found herself overwhelmed with emotion sometimes, crying at small things, but Owen was endlessly patient. He held her when she needed comfort, made her laugh when she was sad, and talked to her belly every night, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the life they would have together. Winter in Nebraska was harsh, with bitter cold and heavy snows, but the house was warm and snug, and Eleanor felt safe and content. She spent her days sewing baby clothes, knitting blankets, and preparing the small room next to their bedroom to be a nursery. Owen built a cradle with his own hands, carved with intricate designs, and Eleanor lined it with soft quilts. In late March, as the first signs of spring began to appear, Eleanor's labor began. Owen rode into town to fetch the midwife while Mrs. Peterson stayed with Eleanor, helping her through the early stages of labor. By the time Owen returned with the midwife, a capable woman named Martha, who had delivered half the babies in the county, Eleanor was in serious pain. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Owen stayed close, holding Eleanor's hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. Mrs. Peterson and Martha worked together with practiced efficiency. And finally, as the sun was beginning to set on the second day, Eleanor gave one last great push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It is a boy," Martha announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A fine, healthy boy." Eleanor collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. Owen's face was wet with tears as Martha cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Eleanor's arms. "Hello, little one," Eleanor whispered, looking down at the tiny, red face. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused eyes, his little mouth working. "Welcome to the world." "He is perfect," Owen said, his voice choked with emotion. He reached out a finger and the baby's tiny hand closed around it with surprising strength. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Oliver, and from the moment he entered the world, he became the center of their universe. Owen was a devoted father, helping with feedings and diaper changes, walking the floor with Oliver when he fussed at night. Eleanor found motherhood both exhausting and fulfilling in ways she had never imagined. She loved the weight of her son in her arms, the sweet smell of him, the way he depended on her completely. As Oliver grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Owen hired more hands and expanded his herd. He built a new barn and improved the house, adding a proper dining room and a larger kitchen. Eleanor managed everything with calm efficiency, balancing the demands of motherhood with her responsibilities as a rancher's wife. When Oliver was 2 years old, Eleanor became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1879, she gave birth to twin daughters. Owen was beside himself with joy, declaring that his family was now complete. They named the girls Emma and Alice, and watching Owen with his daughters was one of Eleanor's greatest pleasures. He was so gentle with them, so patient, singing them lullabies and telling them stories, letting them climb all over him like he was a piece of furniture. The years passed in a blur of activity and growth. Oliver grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved following his father around the ranch. Emma and Alice were inseparable, with wild imaginations and infectious laughter. The house was always full of noise and energy, and Eleanor found herself grateful every single day for the family she had found. Mrs. Peterson eventually retired, moving to live with her daughter in Omaha, and Eleanor hired a young woman named Sarah to help with the housework. Sarah was good with the children and became like a younger sister to Eleanor. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Eleanor on a rare trip away from the ranch. They left the children in Sarah's capable care and spent 3 days in Omaha, staying in a fine hotel and dining in restaurants. On their last night, as they stood on the balcony of their room overlooking the city, Owen pulled Eleanor into his arms. "You ever think about that day at the train station?" he asked. "When I found you in the storm?" "Sometimes," Eleanor said. "It feels like a different lifetime now. Like it happened to someone else." "I think about it often," Owen said. "I think about how close I came to not being there, to not finding you. I almost stayed home that day because of the weather, but something made me ride into town anyway, and there you were." "Fate," Eleanor said softly. "Maybe. Or maybe just dumb luck. Either way, finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You and the children, you are everything to me, Eleanor. I want you to know that." "I do know it," Eleanor said, reaching up to touch his face. "And you are everything to me, too. You saved my life that day, Owen. Not just physically, but in every way that matters. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to wake up happy every morning. I love you more than I could ever put into words." Owen kissed her then, slow and deep, and Eleanor felt the same spark she had felt the first time he kissed her, all those years ago. Some things never changed, never diminished, and her love for Owen was one of them. They returned to the ranch to find the children wild with excitement to see them. Oliver, now 12, tried to act grown up and dignified, but even he could not hide his joy at his parents' return. Emma and Alice, age 10, launched themselves at Eleanor and Owen. talking over each other in their eagerness to share everything that had happened while they were gone. That night, after the children were finally in bed, Owen and Eleanor sat on the porch as they had done countless times before, watching the stars come out over the prairie. "I have been thinking," Owen said. "Oliver is getting old enough to start taking on more responsibility around the ranch. I want to start teaching him the business side of things, how to manage the accounts and plan for the future. Someday, this will all be his, and I want him to be ready." "He will be a good rancher," Eleanor said. "He has your work ethic and your love for this land." "And what about the girls?" "I want them to have choices in life. I have been thinking we should hire a tutor, someone who can give them a real education. Maybe they will want to stay here and marry local boys, or maybe they will want to go to college, see the world. I want them to be able to choose." Eleanor smiled. "You are a good father, Owen Osborne, the best father these children could have asked for." "I try," Owen said. "I want to give them the childhood I never had, full of love and security and possibility. And I want them to see what a real marriage looks like, what real love looks like. I want them to never settle for less than what we have." "They will not," Eleanor said confidently. "They see us every day, they know what love looks like." As the years continued to pass, the Osborne Ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Owen's hard work and careful management paid off, and by the time Oliver turned 18, they owned over 1,000 acres and ran several hundred head of cattle. Oliver had become a skilled rancher in his own right, working side by side with his father, learning everything Owen had to teach him. Emma and Alice, now 16, had received an excellent education from the tutor Owen had hired, and both showed keen intelligence and distinct personalities. Emma was practical and level-headed, with a gift for mathematics and organization. Alice was more creative, filling notebooks with stories and poems, dreaming of becoming a writer. Eleanor watched her children grow with pride and a touch of melancholy. They were not babies anymore, and soon they would be making their own way in the world. But she was also excited to see who they would become, what lives they would build for themselves. On a warm evening in June of 1891, the family gathered on the porch after dinner. Owen and Eleanor sat in their usual rocking chairs, with Oliver leaning against the porch rail and the girls sitting on the steps. They were discussing plans for the upcoming harvest when a rider appeared on the road leading to the ranch. As the rider drew closer, Eleanor recognized him as the postmaster's son from Fort Kearny. He pulled up his horse and dismounted, pulling an envelope from his saddlebag. "Evening, folks," he said. "Got a telegram here for Mrs. Eleanor Osborne." Eleanor took the envelope with trembling hands. Telegrams were rarely good news. She opened it carefully and read the brief message inside. "What is it?" Owen asked, seeing her expression change. "It is from a lawyer in Omaha," Eleanor said slowly. "Apparently, Thomas Hayes's mother has died. She left me something in her will. The lawyer wants me to come to Omaha to receive it." There was a long silence. Owen reached over and took Eleanor's hand. "Do you want to go?" Eleanor thought about it. She had not seen or heard from the Hayes family in 15 years, not since that confrontation in the yard. She had assumed they had forgotten about her entirely. "I do not know," she said honestly. "Part of me is curious, but part of me wants nothing to do with them." "I think you should go," Oliver said unexpectedly. Everyone turned to look at him. "Not for them, but for you, for closure. You do not want to spend the rest of your life wondering what she left you or why." "He is right," Owen said. "And I will come with you. We will make a trip of it, stay a few days, see the sights. The children can manage the ranch for a week or so under Sarah's supervision." So it was decided. A week later, Owen and Eleanor took the train to Omaha. their first trip on a train since Eleanor's fateful journey all those years ago. Eleanor found herself nervous as they pulled into the station, memories flooding back. But Owen was beside her, solid and reassuring, and she drew strength from his presence. The lawyer's office was in the heart of the city, a prosperous-looking building that spoke of success and respectability. The lawyer himself was a middle-aged man named Mr. Bennet, who greeted them with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Osborne, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "I am sure this must be somewhat surprising for you." "It is," Eleanor agreed. "I had not heard from the Hayes family in many years. I did not even know Mrs. Hayes had passed." "She died 3 months ago," Mr. Bennet said, "and in her will she left specific instructions regarding you." He opened a folder on his desk. "She left you a sum of $500, along with a letter." $500 was a significant amount of money, more than Eleanor had expected. Mr. Bennet handed her an envelope, and with shaking hands, she opened it and began to read. The letter was written in a spidery hand, and Eleanor could picture the elderly Mrs. Hayes sitting at her desk, composing these words: "Dear Eleanor, if you are reading this, then I am dead. I have lived with the memory of what we did to you for many years now, and it has weighed on my conscience. We were wrong to leave you at that train station. We were wrong to turn our backs on you when you needed help. We were afraid and grieving, and we took it out on you, and that was unforgivable. I heard some years ago that you had married well, that you were happy and thriving. I am glad of that. You deserved better than what our family gave you. This money cannot make up for our actions, but perhaps it can serve as an apology of sorts. I hope you have found peace and happiness. I hope you can forgive us, though we do not deserve it. Mary Hayes." Eleanor read the letter twice, then handed it to Owen. When he finished reading, he looked up at her, his eyebrows raised in question. "Well," Eleanor said slowly, "that was unexpected. Do you forgive them?" Owen asked. Eleanor thought about it. She thought about that frightened girl standing in the storm, about the fear and uncertainty she had felt. But she also thought about everything that had come after, about Owen and the ranch and their children, and the life they had built together. If the Hayes family had not abandoned her, she never would have met Owen. She never would have found the love and happiness that had defined her adult life. "Yes," she said finally, "I forgive them, not because they deserve it, but because I do not want to carry anger around anymore. What they did led me to Owen, and I cannot regret that." Mr. Bennet handled the paperwork, and Eleanor walked out of the office with a bank draft for $500 and a sense of closure she had not known she needed. "What do you want to do with the money?" Owen asked as they walked through the streets of Omaha. "I want to use it to set up trust funds for the children," Eleanor said. "Equal shares for each of them to help them start their adult lives. It seems fitting somehow." Owen agreed, and they spent the rest of their time in Omaha arranging the trusts and enjoying the city together. When they returned home, they found the ranch running smoothly and the children full of stories about their adventures while their parents were away. Time continued its relentless march forward. Oliver married at 22, bringing home a sweet young woman named Catherine, who quickly became a beloved member of the family. They built a house on the far side of the ranch property, and Oliver took over more and more of the daily operations as Owen began to slow down with age. Emma, true to her practical nature, opened a bookkeeping business in Fort Kearny, helping local businesses and ranchers manage their accounts. She married at 25, a banker named Robert, and they had 3 children in quick succession. Alice moved to Denver to pursue her dream of writing, and to everyone's surprise, she succeeded. Her first book, a novel about life on the Nebraska prairie, became a regional success. She married a newspaper editor named Henry, and they split their time between Denver and the ranch, always coming home for Christmas and summers. Owen and Eleanor watched their children flourish with deep satisfaction. They had given their children roots and wings, and now they were watching them fly. On a golden afternoon in October of 1900, Owen and Eleanor celebrated their 24th wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered at the ranch house, now expanded and modernized but still fundamentally the same home where they had raised their children. There were grandchildren running through the house now, filling it with noise and laughter, just as their parents had done before them. After dinner, Owen pulled Eleanor away from the crowd, leading her out to their favorite spot on the rise overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. They stood together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, just as they had stood so many times before. "You remember what I said to you the night of our wedding?" Owen asked. "When I brought you up here and we looked out over the ranch. You said you wanted to grow old watching the sunset over this land with me by your side," Eleanor said. "I did, and here we are, doing exactly that." Owen turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You have given me the best years of my life, Eleanor. You have given me a family, a home full of love and laughter, a reason to get up every morning. I look at you now and I see the girl I found in the storm, and I see the mother who raised our children, and I see my partner who has walked beside me through everything life has thrown at us. And I still love you more than I did the day I married you, which I did not think was possible." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. "I love you too, Owen. You were my miracle, my answered prayer. You appeared out of that storm and you saved me, and you have been saving me every day since. You showed me what love really is, what partnership really means. Everything good in my life came from that moment when you said, 'I will take you home.' You kept that promise, Owen. You took me home, and I have been home ever since." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, and from the house below came the sounds of their family, their legacy, their future. They had built something lasting and true, something that would carry on long after they were gone. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Eleanor thought about that frightened young woman standing in the storm so many years ago. If she could go back and tell that girl what the future held, she would barely believe it. But it had all been real, all been true. One moment of desperation had led to a lifetime of love, and Eleanor was grateful for every single day of it. The years that followed were peaceful and fulfilling. Owen remained active in the ranch's management well into his 60s, though he left more and more of the daily operations to Oliver. Eleanor stayed busy with her grandchildren, her garden, and her various charitable works in Fort Kearny. They had built a good life, a life filled with love and purpose and family, and neither of them took a single day of it for granted. On a crisp morning in early spring of 1910, Owen woke to find Eleanor already up and standing by the window, looking out at the ranch. He came to stand beside her, following her gaze. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how lucky we are," Eleanor said simply. "About how one terrible storm led to 34 years of happiness. About how grateful I am that you were the man who found me that day." "I was the lucky one," Owen said, pulling her into his arms. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Eleanor Osborne. The very best thing." They stood there together as the sun rose over their land, over the ranch they had built, over the life they had created through hard work and love and unwavering commitment to each other. And in that moment, watching the light spread across the prairie, they were both perfectly content. Eleanor lived to see all her grandchildren grown, lived to see the ranch pass successfully to the next generation, lived to celebrate 53 years of marriage to the man who had saved her from that storm. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76, surrounded by family, Owen was holding her hand, just as he had held it through all the years of their life together. Owen followed her less than a year later, his children gathered around his bed as he drew his last breath. His final words were simple and true. "Tell Eleanor I am coming home." They were buried together on the rise overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple but meaningful. It bore their names, their dates, and a single line: "Two souls, one storm, one love, one home." And the ranch continued on, generation after generation, built on the foundation of love that Owen and Eleanor had established. Their great-grandchildren worked the land, raised their own families in the houses that dotted the property, and told stories of the great-great-grandparents who had started it all. The story of how Owen found Eleanor in a storm and said, "I will take you home," became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best ones, if we are brave enough to take a chance on love. The legacy they left was not measured in acres or cattle or wealth, though they had plenty of all three. Their legacy was measured in love, in the family they had built, in the example they had set of what a real partnership could be. They had shown their children and grandchildren that true love existed, that it was worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth building a life around. And long after they were gone, their story lived on, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of love, and the truth that sometimes the best homes are not the ones we are born into, but the ones we find in the hearts of those who choose to love us. Eleanor had been left at a train station in a storm, abandoned and alone. But she had been found by a man with a good heart and steady hands, a man who had promised to take her home. And he had kept that promise every single day for the rest of their lives together.